For more on this, we can bring in Peter Zalmayev, director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative. Peter, it's always good to have you on the show. We've just been getting some information in on the European counterproposals that include the Ukrainian army capping its military to 800,000 in peacetime, NATO not permanently stationing troops in Ukraine, and Ukraine receiving a U.S. guarantee that mirrors NATO's Article 5. But the biggest one there that I want to discuss is this Ukraine open to negotiations on territorial swaps. That's kind of a big concession. So what do you think the reaction to that will be back in Ukraine?
Zelensky and his team have to walk a very, very tight rope, so to speak, when it comes to any territorial concessions, considering where we are now from, where we were, let's say, 2 years ago, when most Ukrainians were expecting Ukraine to be able to gain back all of its territory and drink coffee in Crimea, etc. And now we're talking about, quibbling over whether we will get to keep 85% of our territory or 80%. All of these concessions are very painful. But Ukraine has to be seen as a party ready to talk. It cannot be saying a hard no to Trump, as we've seen how upset he gets with that. Having said that, the original 28 proposal, as it was leaked, is not acceptable in the sense that the territorial concession that Russia is demanding, according to this plan, and according to which America is going along, would be ceding the rest of the Donbass, which is not just some uninhabited land, but we're talking about hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian citizens living in those territories. What happens to them? I think this is, in the way that this proposal has been presented, is a non-starter. But at the same time, Ukraine will have to make some painful territorial choices. I'm just not sure that it's can afford losing Sloviansk and Kramatorsk cities. Each one of them is 200,000 people.
Now, Peter, you mentioned there Trump gets very upset. He did, even as these talks are going on, he's taken now to Truth Social to say that Ukraine is not grateful again. So is that influencing what's happening here with the negotiating teams? I mean, the Americans obviously have to know that he's been putting this out there. Is that overshadowing what's happening?
But it will always overshadow what's happening. At the same time, Ukrainians are not the only ones who are raising complaints about this. And I think they have pretty solid allies, bipartisan, both the Democrats and Republicans in the House, in the Senate, who are up in arms about this. Mitch McConnell, a stalwart of Republican politics, has said that this is really pretty much giving Putin everything he wanted after America expended that much capital and time on this. What are we getting in turn? Putin's wish list, Lindsey Graham, heads of foreign affairs committees and their deputies. Everyone is unhappy about this plan. It will have to be reworked, and we've seen that there's actually confusion as to who presented it exactly, whether it was dictated by the Russians, whether it was actually reworked by the Americans. It seems like no one wants to take responsibility for the way it is, and so we will see how it will get transformed. But having said that, yes, the Ukrainians have to be very careful. We cannot afford a repeat of that fiasco in the White House, the original meeting between the two presidents, in order not to alienate Donald Trump. But once again, Donald Trump also is between a rock and a hard place. He knows that he's not going to be able to sell this as this is, simply because, once again, it is such a departure from the position of his own party vis-a-vis the Russians.
Now, Peter, you mentioned there, the Ukrainian negotiating team is treading very carefully here in Geneva. We did hear that they said that the draft of a new draft is reflecting some of Kyiv's key priorities, while U.S. officials have said they've been ironing out some difficult points. So can we expect anything concrete to come out of the talks that could ultimately be more favorable to Kyiv?
I think they could, and I think once again, Kyiv is not negotiating once again just to please Donald Trump. I mean, there's a realization that it's a war of attrition. It's a race against time, contrary to what a lot of experts have had been saying recently, that time is running out for the Russians, considering its economy, etc. I've had doubts on that score. It's Russia has proven more resilient than originally was thought, and so actually did Ukraine. But Russia is the bigger power here. Russia has the reliable support of China and other of its allies, and you see how feeble our support has been simply because of this unorthodox position on the other side of the Atlantic. But I think I'm optimistic that Ukrainians will find once again common language with the Americans. But it's the Russian side we're not addressing. And Russians, once again, take note, Russians are not there yet. They're not negotiating at this stage. Putin has said that he kind of likes it, but not, he hasn't made any solid commitments. My sense is that it's the Russian side. It once again will be the recalcitrant one, and the ball will be back in the Russians' court, and it will be Donald Trump once again threatening new sanctions on Russia and threatening to give Ukraine the Tomahawk weapons, simply because Putin thinks that he's got everything to gain from pressing his advantage on the battlefield. They actually have stepped up their attacks. They've picked up the pace of getting more Ukraine territory. They're actually having some battlefield successes, and I just don't see that Putin has anything to gain from stopping it right now.
Peter, thank you so much for sharing your analysis with us. I'm sure you'll be keeping a close eye on what else is coming out of those meetings in Geneva. That's Peter Zalmayev, from the director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative.